The unexpected encounter. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Moonbeam Café as Nora pushed through the familiar glass door. The gentle chime announced her arrival, just as it had every day after school for the past month. This small café on the outskirts of the city had become her sanctuary, a quiet escape from the chaos of homework, classmates, and the endless rush of adult life that surrounded her. She loved everything about this place, the soft jazz music that played in the background, the way the barista Maria always smiled and asked about her day, and especially the corner booth by the window where she could watch the world go by while sipping her hot chocolate. But today felt different. As Nora approached her usual spot, she noticed it was occupied. A figure sat hunched over a steaming cup, wrapped in an oversized brown coat that seemed too heavy for the mild weather. What caught her attention wasn't just that someone was in her seat, it was something else entirely. The stranger's skin had an unusual texture, almost like bark on an ancient tree, with faint patterns that seemed to shimmer when the light hit them just right. But it was his eyes that made her stop in her tracks. They glowed with a soft blue light, like two stars captured in glass. Most children would have run. Most adults would have called the authorities. But Nora had always been different, curious where others were cautious, brave where others were afraid. She walked over to the booth, her small hands gripping the strap of her backpack. "Hello," she said softly, tilting her head to get a better look at the mysterious visitor. "Are you okay? You look sad." The stranger lifted his head slowly, those luminous eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the entire café seemed to hold its breath. The gentle hum of conversation faded, the clinking of cups stopped, and even the coffee machine seemed to pause its gurgling. He began, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place, "I am simply observing." Nora smiled, the same warm smile she gave to stray cats and lonely elderly people at the bus stop. "Observing what?" "Your people. Your world." He gestured slightly toward the window where pedestrians hurried past. "It is different from what I expected." Without invitation, Nora slid into the booth across from him, setting her backpack on the floor. "I'm Nora. What's your name?" The stranger hesitated, as if the question itself was foreign to him. "You may call me Kale." "Nice to meet you, Kale." She studied his face with the innocent directness that only children possess. "You're not from here, are you?" Something flickered in those glowing eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "No," he said quietly. "I am not." An unlikely friendship. Over the next hour, Nora found herself completely captivated by her new companion. She ordered her usual hot chocolate and somehow convinced Kale to try a blueberry muffin, which he examined with the careful attention of a scientist studying a new species. "Where are you from?" Nora asked, watching as he delicately broke off a piece of the muffin. Kale's eyes grew distant, as if he were looking through the café walls into the vast expanse of space itself. "Very far away. A place among the stars that you cannot see from here." "Is it pretty?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He paused, the muffin forgotten in his hands. "It was," he said softly. "Once, it was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Cities that stretched across continents, oceans that sparkled like liquid diamonds, and skies filled with 3 moons. What happened to it?" Kale's expression darkened. "War. Time. The universe has a way of taking away everything you hold dear." He looked directly at her then, those glowing eyes filled with a sadness so deep it made Nora's chest ache. "I am the only one left." Without thinking, Nora reached across the table and placed her small hand on his much larger one. His skin was warm, despite its unusual texture, and she could feel a slight vibration beneath the surface, like energy humming just below. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "That must be very lonely." For a being who had lived for millennia, who had commanded fleets of starships and governed billions of subjects across dozens of worlds, this simple act of human compassion was overwhelming. Kale stared down at the small hand covering his own, feeling something he hadn't experienced in centuries: connection. "You are not afraid of me," he observed, his voice filled with wonder. Nora tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. "Why would I be afraid? You seem nice. A little sad, but nice." "I am different. My appearance, my origins." "So?" Nora interrupted with the blunt honesty of childhood. "My friend Marcus has 2 different colored eyes, and Sarah in my class walks with crutches. Everyone's different somehow. That doesn't make them scary." Cale felt something crack inside his chest, not painful, but like ice breaking after a long winter. "You have great wisdom for someone so young. My mom says I'm an old soul." Nora grinned, then grew serious again. "Do you have any friends here? On Earth, I mean. You are the first person I have spoken to since I arrived." "Well, now you have a friend," Nora declared with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "I'll be your friend, Cale. Friends don't let friends be lonely." Hidden truths. Days turned into weeks, and Nora's visits to the café became something both she and Cale looked forward to. She would arrive each afternoon, her backpack full of homework she rarely touched, more interested in hearing Cale's stories about distant worlds and alien civilizations. He told her about planets where it rained crystals, about creatures that could fly through space without ships, and about technologies that could heal any wound or transform matter with a thought. But he never mentioned his true identity, never spoke of the empire he had once ruled or the title that had once commanded respect across the galaxy. To Nora, he was simply Cale, her friend who came from the stars. One afternoon, as autumn rain drummed against the café windows, Nora noticed something different about Cale. He seemed more restless than usual, his glowing eyes frequently darting to the windows as if he were watching for something. "Is everything okay?" she asked, abandoning her math homework. Cale was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Nora, what would you do if you discovered that someone you cared about wasn't who you thought they were?" The question was clearly meant for her, but something in his tone suggested he was also asking it of himself. "I guess it would depend," she said thoughtfully, stirring her hot chocolate. "Like, if they were a bad person pretending to be good, that would be scary. But if they were a good person who just had secrets? I think everyone has secrets. Even you." Nora giggled. "Especially me. I haven't told you that I sometimes sneak cookies before dinner, or that I talk to my stuffed animals like they're real people." Despite everything weighing on his mind, Cale smiled. "Those are charming secrets. See? Secrets aren't always bad." She looked at him with those perceptive eyes that seemed far too wise for her age. "Do you have a secret, Cale?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the café's warm lights flickered slightly. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "A very big secret. Do you want to tell me?" Cale studied her face, this remarkable child who had shown him more kindness in a few weeks than he had experienced in centuries. She deserved the truth, but the truth was vast and complex and might frighten her away. "What if I told you," he said carefully, "that I wasn't just from another planet, but that I used to be important? Very important." Nora leaned forward, intrigued. "Important how? What if I told you that I once ruled over many worlds, commanded great fleets of ships, and that millions of beings across the galaxy once called me their emperor?" He expected disbelief, perhaps laughter. Instead, Nora was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the same careful consideration she gave to difficult math problems. "Were you a good emperor?" she asked finally. The simplicity of the question nearly undid him. Not, "Do you expect me to believe that, or prove it?" Simply, "Were you good?" "I tried to be," he said honestly. But power can change a person. Make them forget what truly matters. And what truly matters? Cale looked at this extraordinary little girl, who had reminded him of his own capacity for gentleness, and knew the answer with absolute certainty. Connection. Kindness. The ability to see the good in others, even when they cannot see it in themselves. Nora smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand as she had done so many times before. Then I think you are probably a very good emperor. And you're definitely a very good friend. The weight of truth. The next day, Kale wasn't at the café. Nora waited for an hour, her hot chocolate growing cold as she stared at the empty booth where her friend usually sat. Maria, the barista, noticed her distress and brought over a fresh cookie, but Nora barely touched it. When Kale finally appeared the following afternoon, Nora could see immediately that something had changed. His usual calm demeanor seemed strained, and his glowing eyes held an urgency that made her stomach flutter with worry. "I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday," he said as he slid into the booth across from her. "I had to take care of some things." "What kind of things?" Kale hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Nora, I need to tell you something important. The secret I mentioned, it's bigger than I let on." He reached into his coat and withdrew what looked like a small, crystalline device. It pulsed with the same blue light as his eyes, and when he placed it on the table, it projected a holographic image into the air above them. Nora gasped as she saw it, a vast city among the stars, with spires that stretched into space and ships moving like schools of fish between towering structures. It was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. "This was my home," Kale said quietly. "The capital of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. I was not just any ruler, Nora. I was the last of the imperial bloodline, the final emperor of the Andromeda Coalition." The hologram shifted, showing fleets of enormous ships, beings of dozens of different species, and finally, a figure in elaborate robes standing before a massive throne. The figure's face was unmistakably Kale, but younger, more regal, surrounded by the trappings of absolute power. "You really were an emperor," Nora breathed, her eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "For over 1,000 years, Kale confirmed. But empires fall, Nora. Mine fell to civil war, plague, and the simple entropy of time. One by one, my worlds went dark. My people scattered to the winds or simply, ceased to be. I was left alone, the ruler of nothing but memories. Is that why you came to Earth?" Kale deactivated the device, and the café returned to its normal, quiet atmosphere. "I came here to die," he said simply. "I had traveled the galaxy, searching for any remnant of my people, any world that might still remember the coalition. But I found nothing. Earth was meant to be my final destination, a small, unremarkable planet where I could spend my last days in solitude." Nora felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "But you don't want to die anymore?" "No," Kale said, his voice soft with amazement. "A remarkable human child reminded me that even someone who has lost everything can still find something worth living for." "What's that?" "The chance to make a difference in someone else's life. The opportunity to be more than the sum of your failures and losses." He looked directly at her, his glowing eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved me, Nora. Not with weapons or technology or the power of empires. You saved me with kindness." Nora wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "So what happens now? Do you have to go back to space?" Kale shook his head. "The galaxy is a big place, full of worlds that need help, people who are lost and alone. I thought my days of making a difference were over, but you've shown me that leadership isn't about thrones and titles. It's about reaching out to others, one person at a time. Does this mean you're leaving?" The question hung between them, heavy with the weight of inevitable change. Kale reached across the table and took her small hand in his larger one, feeling the warmth and strength of human connection that had become his anchor in the vast loneliness of space. "Yes," he said gently. "But not forever. And not without a promise. A promise among the stars." Their final afternoon together was bittersweet. Kale had explained that he'd received a signal, the first he'd detected in decades, from a group of refugees from his fallen empire. They were stranded on a distant world, and while they were few in number, they represented hope. The possibility of rebuilding, not an empire of conquest, but a community of healing. "Will I ever see you again?" Nora asked, trying to be brave but unable to keep the sadness from her voice. Kale smiled, the expression transforming his alien features into something unmistakably warm and paternal. "What did I tell you about promises?" "That emperors always keep them," Nora replied, remembering their conversation from the week before. "And I may no longer be an emperor in the traditional sense, but I am still bound by that code." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small pendant, a crystal that pulsed with the same gentle blue light as his eyes. "This will let you know when I'm thinking of you. And trust me, that will be often." Nora took the pendant, feeling its warmth against her palm. "What will you do out there?" "What you taught me to do," Kale said. "I'll find people who are alone and remind them that they don't have to be. I'll help the lost find their way, and the broken find healing. There are so many worlds out there, Nora, full of beings who have forgotten how to hope. And you'll teach them?" "I'll try. Though I suspect I'll learn more from them than they will from me. That seems to be the way with the best teachers." He stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the afternoon light. "Your friendship gave me back my purpose, little one. You reminded me that true power isn't about ruling over others, it's about lifting them up." Nora stood too, and without hesitation, threw her arms around Kale in a fierce hug. For a moment, the former Galactic Emperor simply stood there, overwhelmed by this final act of unconditional affection from the remarkable child who had changed everything. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For seeing past the surface. For offering friendship without conditions. For reminding me that kindness is the most powerful force in any universe." As Kale walked toward the café door, Nora called out to him one last time. "Kale." He turned back, those luminous eyes finding hers across the small space that now felt vast with the weight of goodbye. "Don't forget to make new friends out there, okay? Everyone deserves to have someone who cares about them." Kale's smile was radiant. "I won't forget. That's a promise from an emperor." The door chimed as he stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, and then he was gone. But as Nora looked down at the pendant in her hand, she saw it pulse with warm blue light, and she knew that somewhere among the stars, her friend was keeping his word. Years would pass. Nora would grow up, graduate, find her own path in life. But she would never forget the lonely alien who had taught her that the smallest acts of kindness could echo across the galaxy. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons when the light hit the café windows just right, she would touch the pendant and smile, knowing that somewhere out there, a former emperor was making new friends and keeping old promises. The universe, it turned out, was a lot less lonely when you remembered that everyone, no matter how different, how lost, or how far from home, just needed someone to care. The end.